October 14, 1943, 8:30 a.m., over Schweinfurt, Germany. 291 American B-17 bombers rumbled toward their target, a cluster of ball-bearing factories deep in Nazi Germany. By noon, 60 of them would be burning wreckage scattered across the German countryside. 600 airmen, dead, wounded, or prisoners. The Americans called it Black Thursday. The problem wasn't the bombers, it was that they had to fly alone. No Allied fighter could escort them deep into Germany and make it back. The Luftwaffe knew this, and they slaughtered the flying fortresses at will. But within 6 months, everything would change. Not because of a new tactic, not because of a miracle weapon, but because of a marriage, an American airframe and a British engine that would create the deadliest fighter plane of World War II. This is the story of the P-51 Mustang. Let's rewind to April 1940. Britain is standing alone against Hitler. The Royal Air Force is desperate. They're losing pilots faster than they can train them, and they need fighters, fast. A British purchasing commission arrives in Los Angeles at the offices of North American Aviation, a company that had never built a fighter plane. The British had a simple request. Can you build us Curtiss P-40 fighters under license? The answer they got was unexpected. James Dutch Kindleberger, North American's president, made a bold counteroffer. We can design and build you a better fighter in the same time it would take us to set up P-40 production. The British were skeptical, but desperate. They gave Kindleberger 120 days to deliver a prototype. It was an insane deadline. Most fighters took years to develop, but Dutch Kindleberger had an ace up his sleeve. Chief designer Edgar Schmued, a German-born engineer who had obsessively studied aerodynamics. Schmued had been sketching his dream fighter for years. Now he had 120 days to build it. What happened next was a masterclass in speed and innovation. Schmued's team worked around the clock. They used cutting-edge laminar flow wings, a design that reduced drag by allowing air to flow smoothly over the surface. It was risky, untested at this scale, but it promised speed. They designed the radiator scoop underneath the fuselage to create thrust, not just cooling, turning a drag penalty into an advantage. 102 days later, September 1940, the prototype rolled out. They'd beaten the deadline by 18 days. The British named it Mustang, and when test pilots flew it, they were stunned. It was fast, 390 roar. It was maneuverable. It had range, but there was a fatal flaw. The Mustang's American-made Allison V1710 engine was powerful at low altitude, but above 15,000 feet, it gasped for air. Its single-stage supercharger couldn't compress enough oxygen for combustion, and that was a death sentence. German fighters, the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf Fw-190, dominated the high-altitude battle space where bombers flew. If you couldn't fight at 25,000 feet, you were useless as an escort fighter. The RAF relegated the Mustang to low-level reconnaissance and ground attack. Useful, but not a game-changer. The U.S. Army Air Force was even less interested. They already had high-altitude fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolt and P-38 Lightning. The Mustang seemed destined to be a footnote. But then, 5,000 miles away, a British engineer had an idea. Ronald Harker, a test pilot for Rolls-Royce, flew a Mustang in April 1942. He was blown away by the airframe but frustrated by the engine. He sent a letter to his superiors with a simple suggestion. This aircraft would be exceptional if fitted with a Merlin engine. The Rolls-Royce Merlin was already legendary. It powered the Spitfire and the Lancaster bomber. But what made it special wasn't just power, it was the two-stage, two-speed supercharger. Let me explain. At high altitude, air is thin. Engines need compressed air to burn fuel efficiently. The Allison engine had one compressor stage, enough for low altitude, but the Merlin had 2 stages, each compressing the air further. At 25,000 feet, where the Allison wheezed, the Merlin roared. The British didn't just suggest it, they did it. At the Rolls-Royce facility at Hucknall, they pulled the Allison out of a Mustang and shoehorned in a Merlin 61 engine. October 1942. Test pilot Ronnie Shepard took the hybrid Mustang up. The results were revolutionary. Top speed, 441 mph, 29,000 feet. Faster than almost any fighter in the world. Climb rate, stunning. Maneuverability, still extraordinary. The Mustang had been reborn. The U.S. Army Air Force took notice. They ordered the Merlin-powered version, built under license by Packard Motor Company in Detroit, as the P-51 Mustang. But there was one more crucial modification: drop tanks. Engineers added external fuel tanks under the wings. When empty, pilots could jettison them and fight unburdened. This gave the Mustang an operational range of over 1,000 miles. Think about that. It could fly from England to Berlin and back. No Allied fighter had ever done that. December 1943, just 2 months after Black Thursday, the first P-51Bs arrived in England with the 354th Fighter Group. The Hunter had become the Hunted. March 1944. The first Mustangs escorted bombers all the way to Berlin. For the first time, Luftwaffe pilots couldn't pick off American bombers at will. Now they had to face an enemy that could outturn, outclimb, and outlast them. The numbers tell the story. By war's end, Mustangs destroyed 4,950 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter in Europe. They achieved a kill-to-loss ratio of 3.7 to 1 in air combat. Bomber losses dropped dramatically once Mustang escorts became standard. General Jimmy Doolittle, commander of the 8th Air Force, made a critical tactical change. He unleashed the Mustangs. Instead of staying glued to the bombers, they could hunt aggressively, destroying the Luftwaffe on the ground and in the air. The Luftwaffe bled to death. By D-Day, the Allies owned the skies. Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, reportedly said, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." The P-51 didn't just change the air war, it validated a philosophy. Speed of innovation matters more than perfection. North American Aviation built the initial design in 102 days. When it had flaws, they didn't scrap it. They iterated. They adapted. They took the best British technology and merged it with American mass production. By war's end, over 15,000 Mustangs had been built. It served in Korea. It became a legend in air racing. And today, it's one of the most beloved Warbirds ever made. But perhaps the most important lesson is this. Sometimes, greatness isn't about inventing everything yourself. It's about recognizing brilliance wherever it comes from, and having the humility to combine the best ideas into something extraordinary. An American airframe, a British engine, and a warplane that changed history. The next time you hear the deep, rumbling growl of a Merlin engine at an air show, remember, you're not just hearing a machine. You're hearing the sound that shattered the Luftwaffe, protected thousands of bomber crews, and helped win the sky over Europe. You're hearing the sound of the impossible, made real in 102 days.